Okay, on light duty vehicles, we've only got one truck scheduled next year. It's an ag unit, or sorry, a utilities unit. It's good that we only have one unit because we know that vehicles are tough to come by right now. So, well, good. So I don't have anything else on light duty vehicles. Heavy duty trucks, again, we have 3 on order for 21 still. We're looking to get the order in for 22 as well, 3 additional units. And I'll just introduce here what we've got on fire and emergency services. Again, we had some additions to the fleet here. So there is, if we look, I guess the top line here is a new water tender. So I'll introduce that, the current expected budget. Now this is an addition to the fleet. We do currently have one water tender. It was purchased from the city of Medicine Hat in 2017. That unit costed us about, I think it was $70,000. Yeah. We anticipated it to have a 4-year life. The unit's still in good operational condition. With this water tender, the intent at the time was to dispose of that one and purchase a new one in 2022. It had a 5-year life. The ask here is that that one would actually be retained. We would keep the old water tender. We had assumed we would sell it for $70,000. But the ask here is to keep that old water tender and purchase an additional second water tender that would then be strategically located around the county or in different spots of the county. We talked about funding a minute ago, so I just want to recap kind of, because this is an addition, right? In a true sense, an addition. So how does that work? Keep in mind that those reserves, essentially you pre-fund all the things you currently own. This would be in addition to the fleet. So you haven't funded it yet. Because it's coming up in one swoop, we couldn't pre-fund it. If we had said we wanted to buy it in 4 years, we could pre-fund it over 4 years and then put the money away. We're not in that spot. So the ask here is to take this from reserves and purchase this unit. In addition, there's a wildland unit that is requested for Elkwater 1-4 area. The idea here is to dispose of 2 units and not replace 2 trucks and purchase a wildland unit as an alternative. And then we've got some general fire equipment, the extraction units, the extraction tools. We're looking to replace 2 per year over the next 4 years, which would give us our new 8 units in 4 years' time. These are still working, but are nearing the end of their life when we discussed with fire. Additionally, there is an ask to purchase a deputy fire chief truck a year early. Then we would transition the current truck to be the instant command truck or duty officer truck. So that duty officer truck has always been a replacement truck. It's been handed down from different departments. It is old and could be replaced for sure. The ask is to not purchase that new truck, replace that as a new truck, but slide the deputy chief truck to that unit. The deputy chief truck being replaced then 1 year early, okay, from its actual plan. In addition, we've done, the emergency services team has done grain bin rescue training this past year, but it's been identified that they don't actually have the proper equipment to do the train, like from the training they've done, they don't have the proper equipment to do the rescue. So what's asked here is to purchase that grain bin rescue equipment. Again, that's an addition to our fleet or to our fleet and equipment. We would apply for grants. There's some industry grants we can apply for to apply against that type of equipment. So we go down that road. In total, that's a quick summary of your proposed machinery equipment plan for 2022. This plan does go through 22 to 26. I won't dive into all 6 years for you, but yeah, certainly open to any questions, comments, and feedback.
Dustin? So at the fire chief meeting last week, it was identified, the conversation about the water tender came up, and it's actually got identified that's about $100,000 shy to replace or to buy a water tender. So that number should be about 450. So, and the reasoning behind that was for a UL spec tender, which essentially it defines the number of discharges, the dump speed for actual water tendering, as well as your pumping volume and pressure. Why you would want that rating? It would be essentially it's a mobile hydrant for shuttling water back and forth. It affects your ratepayers insurance rates because it gives you that actual UL rating that you have a proper supply of water. And also another thing that came up was, it was with, I'm trying to think of the name of it, Jeffrey, the plant they're looking to build down here, the recycling plant.
Oh, the bio plant
Yes.
at the corner of CeeLo, yeah.
Renew, yeah. So essentially you would need something with that volume capacity if we have a facility like that. So another thing that kind of got brought up in conversation about that as well was the option that you could actually put like a water dragging system on it. And that would be more of an emergency management thing. But if we ever did have a water plant fail within the municipality, or we had a flood and we had to put boil water advisories on, it essentially can make 3,000 gallons a day of drinkable water. But that would be an additional roughly 50,000 to do that. So, but just for thoughts anyways.
Shane?
So with that water tender at $450,000, how many other I mean, we got one already. How many other municipalities like Newell or 40 Mile, you know, which covers big areas too, have two of them, or that Fancy have a one? That's, I'm just looking at, because it's a lot of money for what I classify as a water truck.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with the value on that. This one is essentially because it has a pumping capacity. So our current tender we have, if I'm just going to talk fire flows for a minute, I guess. So on fire flows, if we're pumping 600 gallons a minute out of an engine, the tender can't keep up to it. So it's not the pump setup on, it's actually not capable of pushing that much water into an engine. So you're good for a bit, but you eventually run out. So you're actually, essentially you're putting a fire pump on a tender truck is what you're doing. So that's the idea behind that. As to other municipalities, the county of Newell, I know they have 3 for sure. They may have more that I'm not aware of, because I know there's one that sits in Rolling Hills. There's one that sits at Brooks, and then they have another one at
Rosemary.
or sorry?
Rosemary.
Oh, yes.
They have Rosemary. They have 4 in total.
Okay, 400. So there's one I was missing. There's another one too. I just can't think of where it is. And then the county 40 Mile. I can't remember exactly how many they have, but it's somewhere between 6 and 8. Well, they have more than that. They have so their actual fire pumpers are classified as tender trucks.
So in speaking with them yesterday,
Yeah.
they have 2 water trucks tenders, and the specs I don't know. And then they have 2 retired engines that they use for capacity as a tender as well.
Yeah.
As of yet, that's the information I got yesterday.
So, and essentially they're a little different setup than we are. All their wildland fire trucks or tandem axle trucks that carry 3,000 gallons of water as well. So they run a different setup than what we do. So where we run a structural engine, they actually just have all wildland trucks. So that's kind of where I get my number from of 8. So
we run all structural.
well, our trucks, so essentially all our trucks are structure rated. So County of 40 Mile, what they do is they have their county truck, they call them, which is their tender trucks. They're 3,000 gallon that are off-road capable, and they're not flow rated though. So they'll have pump setups like a Kubota engine with a pump running off of them. So they actually don't meet structural rating, but where they get their structural rating from is they keep around the old green 1980s trucks in the towns, and that's their actual structural trucks. So where we each station has a structural truck. So a structural truck has to be able to flow upwards of 1,500 gallons a minute. And they have a UL rating to take in flow for structural firefighting. But we only carry 1,000 gallons of water in our trucks. The difference between theirs are all tandem axles, ours are all single axles. And the reasoning behind that from back in the day that I remembered is so everybody can drive them. I hope that answers the question kind of. And as far as other municipalities, the only other one I can talk to would be like Maple Creek, another close one. They've got 1 tender truck and 1 engine, but they cover about 1/16 of what we do. So I think like Newell or 40 Mile would be the best comparison. Newell's got different styles of tender trucks. They've got some tandem axle, they've got some single axle, so some that haul 3,000, some that haul 2,000. They have one UL rated truck that sits in Brooks. And then their other ones are actually just essentially tanker trucks, which our truck essentially right now is a tanker truck, the tender that we have.
Mr. Chairman, I spoke with Special Areas Regional Fire Chief yesterday as well. And so in Special Areas, they have 2 in Oyen, 1 in Jenner, 1 in Buffalo, 1 in Empress, 1 in Hannah, 1 in Youngstown, and 1 in Ontario. 2/3 of them are tandems, and a third is single. So they have quite a few strategically placed throughout.
But, Sorry.
Shane, yeah.
but are them, like this here is a special truck with flow rating and that. I mean, there's a big difference in between a water truck bringing water out so they can transfer water to a fire engine compared to this fancy
Yeah.
truck with a flow rating and everything else for structure, where we're always on containment on a structure fire, not.
I don't know the specs of those. I do not know the specs. What I shared is what I know.
Richard?
So the challenge that I'm seeing here is the fact that our mandate for fires and for fighting fires is to contain. It's not to put out, it's to show up on the site and contain. And I can appreciate how awesome these water tenders are, but I think before I would go any farther with it, we should probably have this in our strategic plan or in our meeting and talk about if we want to change it or not, because fantastic amount of money. I'm going to go with the assumption that yes, the other counties, municipalities have a lot of water trucks, but I question how many $500,000 trucks they have sitting there. It's so much money to have in case we need it. Well, it's not right. I mean, we always need more water on the site. Do we need something that fancy? I mean, we've been making this other water tender work before. The contractors are bringing out water. The farmers are bringing out, ranchers, some of them have some pretty big semis that are bringing water out, and it's working. In an ideal situation with no end to the funding, no end to the amount of money, maybe this is the way to go, but I'm really struggling with it now. I could see where we could actually have more, and I go with water tenders, but to me, they're just a water truck that could be spaced out a lot more and having, in my mind, probably used ones that could be sitting in the fire halls and be ready to roll and not have $500,000 sitting there.
Okay, hold on, Dustin, because I see where this is going to go. It's going to go down a rabbit hole talking about this, and we don't have all the information here, obviously, that we need. So at this point, why don't we pull that tender off? It can come back in January, and then Terrelyn can find all the information out, and Dustin, you can have all the information that we need to make a proper decision. And like Richard said, it can go back on the strategic plan. Do we want to change? Like right now, we don't do structural. So why do we have that equipment? There's a whole bunch of questions. That's going to be a long discussion that doesn't need to be part of this. So to make this flow properly, can somebody make a motion to accept this and we pull off the water tender and bring that back at the strategic side of stuff? Okay, I just realized I need a motion for us to discuss this, so. Sorry, but if somebody want to do that, and then we can go into more discussion on the. Shane, you want to do it? Okay, so the motion is, well, we can revise it. Alternative A, and then we'll just figure it out when we get the discussion done. Is that good? Yeah, as amended. We'll amend it when we get to the end of this. Okay. So water tender, we'll discuss that at a different time. Any other questions? Bring forward Shane.
Under heavy duty trucks, I noticed life expectancy, we're back down to 5 years. Which, how many kilometers do we figure we're putting on in them 5 years to be getting rid of them in 5 years?
Sorry, Councillor Hawk, I'm not armed with the actual kilometers of those units, but I think you bring up an extremely good point that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about. As these trucks and units start to appreciate in value, it really changes the value of them as they sit in our yard, and changes this whole plan, how it looks. So we have to, I guess, annually put towards more effort and understand what's happening around us to know is if 5 years is still the right time, or is it 10, or is it 3? Some municipal discounts are going, and I don't want to speak entirely on Kim's behalf, but not seeing him here, I'll let her go a bit. So that I think that's what we're going to do, is put our mind to what that unit's value is sitting in the yard compared to actually replacing it after 5, and is 5 still the right number?
Maybe it's mileage and not years on something like that. Okay. Shane?
So then the other question I got is under reserve funding. If you look, should we be looking at maybe, where did it go now? There we go.
What page
So
you on?
come 2026, our balance ending is about $3 million less than it was in 2020.
What page are you on?
Just hang on. Gotta move my, whoops, wrong direction. Page 25.
Okay.
So under vehicle and equipment replacement fund. So at 2020, we're at 6.3, then we're projected at 2026 down to 3.3. Should we look at maybe contributing more into that vehicle and replacement fund so it doesn't keep dropping down, 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 and down?
Yeah, good question. So what the replacement value does is it looks at the future replacement cost of your current assets. But what causes it to get out of whack is if we add in additional units, so say speculatively like let's just say we were gonna add a tender and we haven't pre-funded or pre-financed that. Essentially, we don't have the cash yet, right? I haven't financed that. So let's just take an example. Let's say we're gonna buy a water tender. Let's say it's gonna cost $450,000 and I'm gonna replace it in 10 years. But I haven't funded it at all on day one. Essentially what it means is I need to put $45,000 per year away to buy the initial unit. Plus I need to put another $45,000 away to buy that unit in year 10 when that unit is now at the end of its life. But what can happen is then over the life of that unit, the cash isn't yet in the bank, right? So we're playing catch up, we're playing from behind. And that's what you're seeing now in these reserves is what's happening is we're trying to catch up from assets that we've purchased that weren't part of the plan, that weren't pre-funded. Now you're seeing it try and catch up and it's falling behind, right, as we start to do that. So if we keep scaling this out farther and beyond, you start to see years where the contributions exceed the withdrawals and it starts to bring itself back in balance. But it's catching up today. And if we keep adding more to the fleet without pre-funding those, it will keep going down and it will keep this trajectory. Right now, if we follow the plan, in year 10, it starts to balance itself back out and you see the reserve fund get back to where it's happy. But if we want to be able to have freedom to continually add units to the reserve without pre-funding, then yeah, we need to increase that contribution because this reserve balance is based on funding the current equipment that you have. But if you want to keep expanding your fleet, essentially you're taking from your left hand to move it to your right hand, but it's so you got to put the cash back sometime, right? It's not gone. It didn't come from thin air. And so we just, that's kind of the example to look at or keep in mind. And that's what you're seeing in this plan is that's why that reserve is taking such a hit.
So back to my point, should we, fellow councilors, start looking at maybe, because this is showing, 6 years down the road, 7 years. you know, that we're dropping, should we be putting a little bit more into that reserve fund?
Or should we be disciplined and not add to the stuff? Steve,
Well, I can't hide it. I'm really excited that this topic came up and that knowledge of what's happening under our feet and perfect explanation, Travis. We're spending money that's already spoken for. And when we put it back in, we have to put it back in twice. I think that's the simplest way to put it. But to your point, Councillor Hawk, if we adopt future planning and we see where our departments are going operationally and from a capital perspective, if we put our minds 3 years from today, it's no problem. You'll never see a bump again. But it's starting to be able to move that mindset to 3 years from to now. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, and to kind of say if we were going to buy, let's just keep the water tender example going. Let's just say we had built out a 5-year plan that said in year 5, we want our level service to be at X level, right? At this level. Then on year 1, you would start funding to purchase that water tender in year 5 ahead of time. So that when you got to that day in year 5, you're walking into the dealership with your $450,000 in hand and you're ready to buy the unit. As an alternative, we're essentially internally financing that, taking it from our right hand to pay it into our left hand, but knowing left hand still has to give the cash back to right hand. So we're taking it from this reserve to fund it into this reserve. So like we say, if we can kind of vision 5 years out, we can plan to fund that for the first 5 years, reflect that it all flows through tax rates, reflect that in rates and income, right, and flow it all the way through the whole structure. And then you've got your cash when you plan to walk in the door.
So alternatively, if you don't have cash in the bank, so we'll continue to, if we continue the practice that we do, we'll be asset rich and cash poor. And so what, instead of having money in the bank to purchase things and thinking ahead, 5-10 years down, what would end up happening is that we would have to get debentures to pay for new equipment. And the other thing as well too, Mr. Chairman, year end is coming soon. We possibly, the surplus could be applied to that reserve, and then at final budget and the mill rate, it can be reevaluated again. So there is that option for this year, but in the future, we need to, and that's the importance of why municipal affairs, like the course the other day, you know, like the 3 and the 5 year, to think ahead to, and it's no, the existing equipment we have, but it's looking at service delivery 5 years down the road, 10 and 20 years, and having that appropriate money in place for the future.
at the minimum, we need to be putting in what we're purchasing that year to make everything work at the minimum. Yeah. Shane?
Cause that's what I was getting at, because I mean, thinking down the road, I mean, we're talking about gasoline alley and, you know, that would take more equipment, more stuff to service, you know, look after that sort of stuff. And to watch our balance going down when we're not thinking ahead.
And that was the funds at the previous meeting. There was the funds put into a restricted surplus reserve for, because when you know you're going to have a future liability, you need to fund that. So that's there is some seed money in there already for that. So we are thinking of the future. One of our biggest things is new equipment. That's our biggest ones, is that new equipment that we have not contributed into reserves for. That's one thing that we need to really consider how to fund in the future.
So one thing, some of this new equipment, like we did that hi-ho or the traco, but we bought that because we were spending all this money on hiring it out. Should not a portion of that gone into financing this equipment? Because we're no longer paying for that side, but it should come back into this side to cover that cost.
You would just contribute higher. It would come from that tax from that year. So you would contribute more.
So we haven't done that though. But that's something we could look at doing. So
Mr. Chairman, to offer some clarity there, what happens is those, kind of the way that operating budget moves with your capital budget is at the beginning of the year, you said you want to fund your future replacement cost, right? That's the goal in this reserve fund, right? So if you have 10 reserve funds and you've kind of set a goal for each of them, in this reserve fund, you've said, I want to fund my future replacement cost of my current assets. I don't want to overfund it. I don't need to build a bunch of slack into that reserve. I want to fund my current assets, the replacement cost of my current assets. So you could flow that in a year. And then you have that freedom at the end of the year. When we look at that bottom line number, your net income number at the end of the year, essentially that's what you have to flow into reserves. And so you could say, okay, I've already funded my replacement cost of my current assets. I'd like to top it up a little bit because I might get creative next year and see if I want to, maybe I want some play money or something to buy an additional addition to the fleet, right? But currently the structure is that money is now overall savings and it could be allocated to a different reserve. It may not be earmarked specific to this reserve. Does that kind of offer some clarity? Now you
Such,
could, like I say,
such
you
as
could offer
future
it.
equipment,
That's right. You could,
future equipment purchases. Fleet
And that wouldn't
additions.
affect this
then-
budget then.
And then, so what you would do is to fund that, you would take it from that reserve, not from the equipment reserve that you funded by equipment that you currently have in your fleet.
That's what you're looking for. That makes more sense.
And that can happen.
I'm going to offer that in a sense it does. What you have as well as a accelerated rehab reserve, which is really intended to be any public works addition that wasn't in the scope of what we currently expected to replace. Now we've traditionally thought of that reserve for construction projects, but it's not to say that it couldn't also expand to have kind of a subcategory of fleet or machinery and equipment. So you do kind of have a reserve in that sense, but not quite exactly the way we speak, but in a sense it's there.
And reserves can be allocated by a motion of council. You have control of those at all times.
Okay. So that'd be something for us to look at in the future here with more thought and more presentation to it. Was there any other questions on anything? Well, no, those are good questions.
The questions for sure are good, Mr. Chairman, and I think we don't take enough time sometimes to talk about all this kind of stuff because really once it gets approved, you get reports back to you on the status or where it's at or cost versus budget, but we don't really dive back into the project. So it's a good time to discuss
we
these
don't think
items.
about it again after it's approved. Steve?
Just perhaps a real world example of how that may look or how, and Jeffrey made a good point that perhaps a lot of that would happen at strategic planning, that we kind of set that future goals where we'd like to go with the level of services we'd like to provide. And then we buy the equipment or start funding that equipment early in anticipation of having a program running in 2026. And perhaps a real world example may be the Ag Service Board. That team, you're kind of up and up on the going ons in agriculture and say, you know what, we need this particular style of equipment. We would like that equipment operational in 2026. No problem. We add it to the capital list. Council approves that. We start funding it. January 1st, 2026, you just take the money and buy it. And you're not having to tax or hamper your reserves or get behind or watch it shrink when you know it needs to go up. So it's just kind of that future planning. And I think it comes truly in that strategic planning sense that we can see where we want to go and not make any movements to go backwards, kind of a thing.
Yeah, great example. Great idea. Any other questions on it? Okay, so I have a motion on the floor, and that is to move as amended. And to amend it, we're going to take out the water tender until strategic planning or till future discussions.
So what I'd recommend is to take it as amended, but then additionally, just so it's crystal clear, have another motion saying that the tender will come back at strategic planning or the January 18th council meeting, just so it's crystal clear and there is no misunderstandings.
Okay, so this first motion is amended, taking out the water tender. Yeah, Shane made that. Any other questions on it? Not seeing any? Vote. That one's carried. Dustin?
So I guess I'll make a motion to bring back the water tender for, I think, strategic planning, probably best.
Yeah, no. Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Vote. Okay, that's carried. We will take a 5-minute break. 3. Waiting for you.
I agree with what you said.
Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. Oh, where did I leave off?
9.3.
9.3, yeah. Carolyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 2022 operating budget is before you, starts on page 32. One addition to the operating budget document is on page 44, is the contributions to other organizations for your information and for our ratepayers and citizens, to show them the contributions that Cypress County, them, contribute to other organizations. Also, to a change in the budget is from presented to you the previous meeting is 15,000 to the library board and $5,000 for a economic development / tourism video as well. 7,000. And that will, so previously there was a surplus of approximately 630,000. That would just decrease it by 22. And that's the only changes.
Okay. Michelle?
I will move it just so we can talk about it because I have a question. That video that you're doing for tourism, is it gonna have all the campgrounds in it? So just we don't have to listen, you know, when Blaine said that the last one didn't have cows in it, so want to just make sure that we have all our bases covered.
So yes, if I can speak to it, Mr. Chairman, I guess. I've had initial conversations with the video producer that created the last video. And there will have to be an agreement or a contract that we enter into if this is included as part of the operational budget. In the scope of the agreement, it includes both Cabin Lake and Sandy Point campground. It includes the golf courses. It includes many of the tourist attractions that we have, such as the Irvin Historic Library. It includes some of the other events that we have throughout the calendar year, such as hopefully, assuming the events occur, things like Quonset Days and the Hilda Mud Bog and some of those types of things. So it would be a video that would sort of feature not only attractions, but also events that bring people to our municipality.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
And in case I didn't mention it, the golf courses as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Hawk.
Page 44, the recreation. What is the Vinerville Cooperative? We give 10,000 to. That's question number one. Question number two, I know the Dunmore Equestrian Center has come forward to want to be on that, and I don't see them on there.
Page 44.
Page 44.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Vinerville Cooperative, they changed their name from a society to a cooperative. Actually, you know what? That is an error. It should be society. They changed that a few years ago. So I think that was just a typing error. Yeah, and the Dunmore question should be added to this as well. Oh, you know what? We were actually going to bring that policy back to have them added in, but they will be part of the 2022 rec funding.
Policy needs to be updated as well.
Yes, we'll get updated then.
Yes.
Okay.
The funds are there. It's just in the rec program. Or in the.
This is a separate document, just listing everything. So yes. So the Dunmore Equestrian Society and then the name change for Viner.
Any other questions?
I was just wondering what is the funding for the Dunmore Equestrian, and then do you have it offhand or?
So 2,500.
It was 2,500.
2,500.
Yep.
Any other questions? Not seeing any other questions. We have a motion on the floor to accept from Michelle. Vote. Okay, that's carried. 10.1, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sole source fire truck purchase on page 73. Recommended motion is that council direct administration to sole source the purchase of a wildland emergency vehicle from Acres Industries for up to a maximum of 300,000 for the funds to come from the emergency services reserve.
Thank you, Carolyn. Dustin, making that. Any questions? Shane?
I know we, like we said, you know, putting stuff out for tender over a certain amount. But this makes sense when to go with this one because we know it fits us. Our employees know it, even in the service department, their shop, you know, so I know it goes against some of our, you know, what we were trying to do going out for tender, but this makes more sense. That was my only comment.
Okay, thank you, Shane. Any other questions or comments? Sure.
Yeah, I kind of like this too, actually. It seems to make sense. So, and that wildland emergency vehicle works well for what we need it for. So I'm happy with it.
Richard?
Just to clarify for me, so are the two older units, are they going someplace else in the system or are they being sold?
They'll be disposed of, surplus.
Any other comment or questions? Not seeing any? Vote. It's carried. 10.2, Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Urban Community Library internet costs on page 75 and a letter requesting it from Shortgrass Library System. The recommended motion is that council direct administration accordingly. The background there is that the cost for CCI Wireless is $210. Shortgrass is proposing the Cypress County provide 50% payment going forward.
Okay, you can make it and then you have the floor if you have any questions. No? Blaine's making the motion for that. Richard, do you have any questions?
I know that the internet, they struggle with it there. It's not something that's that can be relied on. And as an addition to this, I just want to know, can we have staff see what it's going to take to hook onto the SuperNet? Because it just shows that everybody else is paying $35, and here's a $200 plus cost, and it's not adequate.
So previously we looked at that. It was probably 6 months ago to hook up to SuperNet. So when it comes into urban, it comes on the west side, runs around the railway tracks and goes up. The cost at that time was $30,000 to hook up to the SuperNet, and then it's $500 a month, and then an ISP on top of that. But what we can do is we can relook at it. And because what happened was that the library was not hooked up in the early 2000s. Libraries, schools, hospitals all got hooked up for free. At that time, it didn't get hooked up. So we can reevaluate it for sure and bring that back to council. That
It's
was
just-
some time ago.
Okay, it just said, it says the monthly internet expense is $35 for everybody else. Like for people that are on the SuperNet.
Because they signed up at the time.
Really?
Now you sign up.
Yeah.
It's 500.
Because a long time ago, when I was at the county paint nurse, we built a new administration building. And right in the ditch right in front of the admin building was the SuperNet. And because we didn't do it at the time in I think it was like 2003-ish, we didn't hook up at that time. That cost then was going to be $110,000 for them. But we looked at it it's like 6 months ago, so things may have changed, but we can reevaluate that for sure and bring that back to council.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it's not gonna be the route to go for us at all when we do build a new library in Irvine, so we're gonna end up going with just a provider then, instead of going on to the SuperNet, eh?
I would recommend if the new building is built, at that time, that would be the cost to do it. So that would be part of your construction costs to do
But-
that to wherever it goes and when it goes.
Okay, and so I was just asking that we look at our options sooner than later. And so we were more aware of what the costs are gonna be when we build that library. So if I could have that answered someplace down the road about no SuperNet or SuperNet. Okay.
Yeah, it comes in on the west side, goes around the tracks and then goes up. And it's too bad it didn't run just right by, but it doesn't. It goes around the information that we got before.
So how come you get to go with when instead of if?
It's not a if, it is a when, with capital letters.
There goes another $1 million on the top.
But we'll look into that.
Might as well put it out to the universe, what you want.
That was a good one.
I like what Richard says about this. Like, I think we should know how much it's gonna cost, but if it's gonna be astronomical, the library needs internet. So I'm all for this, to pay half of it. Because it's something that the library needs, and every other library in all of Cypress County has it. So why would, we need to do something about it. And I think it's fair that we pay half of it if Shortgrass is paying the other half.
Okay. Richard, you got internet going and you sure you want to speak now?
Yeah, so Justin, make sure you use capital letters when the Irvine Library goes in, please, when you're putting that in the paper. Thank you.
And in brackets, but if right after. Okay, I have a motion on the floor to pay for half the internet. By plane. Any more questions? Vote. That's carried.
And then, Mr. Chairman, if we could get another motion directing administration to come back with costs to hook up to the SuperNet.
Okay, Richard's making that motion. Any questions on it? Vote. It's carried. 10.3, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dunmore Equestrian Project Support. Before you is a request from the Dunmore Equestrian Center. They are applying for the TD Arbor Day Foundation Tree Grant. And they would like to plant trees, and they need a letter of support. The recommended motion that council supports the Dunmore Equestrian Society application to the TD Arbor Day Foundation Tree Grant project to plant 50 native trees at their facility, as this will be an enhancement and a long-term investment in the community.
They got that well. Okay, Richard's making that motion. Any questions on it? Shane?
Just on the bottom at page 79. When they say they are asking the county for a letter of participation, volunteer equipment, guidance, or other support. Now with that wording, other support, they're not talking financial, are they again?
That's why I made it clear in the motion that council supports the Dunbar Questions application. So there's no monetary commitment from the county.
Would you like that added in, Shane? There is no monetary? Would you accept that as friendly? He doesn't look friendly, he said. Just to make sure there's no funds coming from us, it's just a letter of support. Okay, you're good with that, Richard? Okay, motion on the floor. Any other questions about it? Vote. Carried. 10.4, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Community Foundation of Southeast Alberta. At the last council meeting, there was a motion approved by council to contribute $10,000 for the establishment of the Cypress County Community Fund. The next step in the process is to enter into an agreement with them. And so before you is the agreement, and just need a motion of council. The recommended motion is that council enter an agreement with the Community Foundation of Southeastern Alberta to establish the Cypress County Community Fund.
Okay. Lloyd, making that motion? Any questions on it? Vote. Carried. 10.5, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. January council meeting dates. Before you is a request that to cancel the January 4th council meeting, regular scheduled council meeting. And the next one would be, so we'll have one December 21st and then have one January 18th. That's the recommended motion, Mr. Chairman.
Michelle's making that motion. Only got 7 to pick from, so you guys are gonna get picked on quite a bit. Yeah. Try and get quorum for that. Okay. Yeah, January, we usually only have one that month. It's a pretty slow month. Any questions? Vote. Carried. 10.6, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appointment to the Intermunicipal Development Committee with Newell County. Before you is a recommended motion that council appoint 2 members of council to sit on the Intermunicipal Development Plan Committee for the 2021-22 calendar year. Before you is background information in regards to that. Is there any questions?
Thank you. Dustin?
I think it would make sense for Mr. Hawk to be one of the members on that, considering he's a neighboring to it. And I don't know if no one else wants to, I would be the other one.
Shane?
Yeah, I would accept them. Do we want the mayor or mayor, Reeve or deputy Reeve or 2 or, and does Carolyn go on it too, or just 2 counselors this Sunday?
Elected officials and administration would be there as an advisory capacity.
Richard?
I'm gonna say, well, we've got the other 2 counselors on the other one, so if, well, it's not quite the same, but I would recommend that the Reeve is also on there.
I don't have a problem with it if you guys want. So your motion.
So I make my motion, Dan and Shane.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Vote. That's carried. 10.6, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 10.7
Yeah,
Perk
sorry.
and Dirk update. So a couple years ago, because there was some oil and gas companies not paying their taxes, what happens is that we have to forward on school requisition and seniors requisition and designated industrial property requisition. So what happened is that the province made a program that if there is outstandings for school rec and for designated industrial properties, we can apply to them and we get those funds back. So before you on page, I think it is 94, yeah, is the 21 uncollectible oil and gas tax listing. So we would apply for that as we do every year for those two programs.
I thought that program was discontinued.
They extended it.
They did extend it. Steve?
Yeah, it was extended. This is a part of that Bill 77 that we were talking about earlier. This kind of came alongside it. Previously, under these two programs, the municipality had to write these taxes off. That left our outstanding balance a little bit skewed because they were removed from the books. Now, under this program, part of that Bill 77 immediately makes it so the municipality does not write off those taxes. So we can sit them, we can leave them there, and we may be able to recuperate them or push the matter a little bit more, which is something that we've been asking for. It's good to see.
Yeah. Good deal. Shane or Blaine?
Yeah, I would like to make that motion that we complete the application. I read into that. Good idea.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Vote. It's carried. 10.8, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With a heavy heart, I recommend that council set the by-election for Ward 9 for February 7th, 2022.
Dustin?
I'll move that.
Vote. Carried. 10.9, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appointment of returning officer. It's a two-part motion that council appoints Sean Rooney as the returning officer under the Local Authorities Election Act, and that also that council appoint Leslie Ann Collins as the substitute returning officer under the Local Authorities Election Act.
Lloyd's making the first motion. Vote. It's carried. Shane's making the second motion. Vote. That's carried. Nothing for 11. 12. Oh, I need a motion to go on camera. Which one? No, that's in camera. That's in camera. Both of them are in. Blaine, make Vote. Okay, that's carried. So I need a motion on the sale then? No sale? Is that what you want? Richard's making the motion that we keep the property. There's no sale on it.
Decline the offer,
Decline the offer.
decline the offer from them. Okay.
Okay, vote. That's carried. The other one, you're just bringing that or following up on the information, so you already have that.
Mr. Chairman, administration will bring back more information in regards to Hidden Valley Ski Resort when more information is received.
Yep. You don't need a motion on that. Okay, but you need a motion on to proceed with the number one by Michelle. For looking into that as discussed in camera.
Closed session.
Okay, vote. Okay, that's carried. The other one was just an update. Richard, you had something?
Yeah, I forgot to make a comment on Tara Lynn's report, actually Public Works. They showed where the speed sign was up, and that was on the front of my place between Highway 3 and Range Road 63. Our average was 200 vehicles a day. Speed limit 58. I thought I did better than 119 kilometers an hour on that short little run, but I guess not. Time for a tune-up, but I just wanted to bring a notice of intent to bring forward a motion. I'm gonna ask to get that speed limit changed from 80 to 60 because of the amount of traffic. So I'll send in an email on that. So.
Yeah. Okay, that is it. Meeting adjourned.